The overhead lights of JFK Airport flickered as Maya walked through the terminal, her carry-on bag rolling smoothly behind her. She was tired, the kind of tired that settles into your bones after 3 back-to-back surgeries and a hospital board meeting that ran 2 hours longer than scheduled. All she wanted was to sink into her seat, close her eyes, and let the hum of the plane engines lull her into sleep during the 8-hour flight to London. She'd dressed for comfort today. Soft jeans, her favorite navy sweater, and the sneakers she always wore when flying. No makeup, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. After 16 years as a cardiovascular surgeon, Maya had learned that comfort mattered more than impressions, especially on long flights. At the gate, she glanced at her boarding pass one more time. Seat 2A, first class. The hospital had insisted on upgrading her ticket for this trip, though she'd initially protested. "You're representing us at an international ceremony," her department chair had said firmly. "You're flying first class, and that's final." When her boarding group was called, Maya gathered her things and made her way down the jet bridge. The flight attendant at the aircraft door smiled warmly at everyone, checking boarding passes with quick, efficient glances. Maya handed hers over. "Welcome aboard," the woman said, barely looking at the pass before waving her through. The first-class cabin was quiet, almost empty. Maya found her seat by the window and settled in, storing her bag in the overhead compartment. She pulled out her laptop, thinking she might review her acceptance speech one more time. The award ceremony was in 3 days, and she wanted every word to be perfect. "Excuse me." Maya looked up. A flight attendant stood in the aisle, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Her name tag read Sharon. "Yes?" Maya said pleasantly. "May I see your boarding pass?" Sharon's tone was polite but held an edge that made Maya's stomach tighten with a feeling she knew too well. "Of course." Maya handed it over, watching as Sharon studied it far longer than necessary. The flight attendant's eyes moved from the pass to Maya's face, then back to the pass again. Sharon murmured, her lips pursing slightly. "And this is definitely your ticket?" Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Yes, it's my ticket. It's just that, well, first class is quite expensive, and I want to make sure there hasn't been any confusion." Sharon's voice carried that particular sweetness that barely masked something ugly underneath. Sometimes passengers accidentally end up in the wrong section. It happens more often than you'd think. "There's no confusion," Maya said, keeping her voice steady. "That's my seat." Other passengers were boarding now, filing past them. An older white man in an expensive suit settled into seat 2C, across the aisle from Maya. He glanced at the interaction, then quickly looked away, suddenly very interested in his phone. Sharon pulled out a tablet, tapping at the screen with sharp, deliberate movements. "Let me just check the manifest." "What's your name?" "Maya Johnson." More tapping. More studying. A younger flight attendant passed by with a curious look, but Sharon waved her away. The seconds stretched out uncomfortably. "Well," Sharon finally said, her tone dripping with barely concealed surprise, "it appears you are assigned to this seat, though I must say it's unusual. Have you flown first class before? Do you understand how the service works here?" Maya's jaw tightened. She'd heard variations of this question her entire life. In medical school. At conferences. At upscale restaurants. "Do you belong here? Are you sure you can afford this? Do you understand how things work in places like these?" "I've flown first class many times," Maya replied quietly. "I'll be fine, thank you." "I'm only trying to help," Sharon said, her smile sharp as glass. "Some passengers find the experience overwhelming if they're not accustomed to it. We have excellent seats in premium economy that might be more comfortable for you." The man across the aisle shifted uncomfortably in his seat. A woman boarding behind them slowed down, sensing the tension. "I'm perfectly comfortable here," Maya said, each word carefully controlled. "May I have my boarding pass back, please?" Sharon handed it over with obvious reluctance, her fingers lingering on the paper a moment too long. "Very well. But if you need anything at all, don't hesitate to ask. We want to make sure all our passengers feel they belong here." The emphasis on belong landed like a slap. Sharon finally moved away, but Maya could feel her presence in the galley behind first class, could sense eyes watching her. She opened her laptop, but the words on the screen blurred. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water bottle. That was ridiculous. Maya turned. The man across the aisle, the one in the expensive suit, was looking at her now. He had kind eyes, she noticed, and something like guilt in his expression. "I'm Richard," he said quietly. and that was completely out of line. "It's fine," Maya said automatically. The words she'd trained herself to say to keep the peace, to not make waves, to not be the angry black woman who causes scenes. "It's not fine," Richard said. "But I understand if you don't want to discuss it with a stranger." He turned back to his phone, and Maya appreciated that he didn't push. She tried to focus on her laptop, but the encounter had left her rattled in a way she hated. After all these years, after everything she'd accomplished, moments like these could still shake her foundation. The cabin filled with passengers. Sharon moved through the aisle, greeting everyone with warm smiles and offers of champagne. When she reached Richard, her voice was honey-sweet. "Good afternoon, sir. May I offer you a glass of champagne? We also have fresh orange juice or sparkling water." "Champagne would be lovely, thank you," Richard said. Sharon turned to Maya, her smile cooling several degrees. "And for you?" "I'd like champagne as well, please," Maya said. "Of course." Sharon disappeared into the galley and returned moments later with 2 glasses. She handed one to Richard with a flourish, then set Maya's down on her tray table without ceremony, a bit of the golden liquid sloshing over the rim. "Oops," Sharon said flatly. "Turbulence." The plane hadn't moved. Maya wiped up the spill with a napkin, her throat tight. She caught the eye of a South Asian woman sitting 1 row ahead across the aisle. The woman had witnessed everything, and the sympathy in her eyes was almost harder to bear than Sharon's hostility. As the plane pushed back from the gate, Maya stared out the window at the airport lights. London waited on the other side of the ocean. An award ceremony. Recognition for years of work saving lives, for the free clinic she'd built, for the surgical technique she'd pioneered that had already helped thousands of patients. But right now, in this moment, none of that mattered to the flight attendant who decided Maya didn't belong in seat 2A. The plane lifted into the sky and Maya closed her eyes. It was going to be a long flight. She had no idea just how long it would feel, or how dramatically everything was about to change. Behind her, in the galley, Sharon whispered to another flight attendant, her voice just barely audible over the engine noise. "I don't know how she afforded that seat, but I'll be keeping an eye on her." "You never know with some people." Maya heard it. She wasn't supposed to, but she did. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. She began typing, documenting everything. The questions, the tone, the champagne incident. Every detail. She'd stayed silent too many times before. She'd let too many moments pass without speaking up, telling herself it wasn't worth the fight, that she had more important battles to wage, but maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. An hour into the flight, Maya's throat was dry. She pressed the call button above her seat and waited. The little light blinked steadily, but no one came. She could hear Sharon laughing with passengers a few rows back, her voice carrying easily through the quiet cabin. 5 minutes passed. Then 10, finally Sharon appeared, her expression flat. "Yes, could I please have some water?" Maya asked. "Sure." Sharon disappeared and returned a minute later with a plastic cup, the kind you'd get in economy class. She placed it on Maya's tray table without a word and turned to leave. "Excuse me?" Maya said, keeping her voice calm. "Everyone else has been served in proper glasses. Could I have a glass as well?" Sharon's smile was tight. "We're running low on clean glassware. I'm sure you understand." Before Maya could respond, Richard pressed his call button. Sharon's demeanor shifted instantly, her face brightening. "Yes, sir? What can I get for you?" "I'd like some water, please," Richard said, his tone pointed. "Of course. Right away." Sharon returned less than a minute later with a crystal glass filled with ice water and a slice of lemon balanced on the rim. She handed it to Richard with a warm smile. Richard looked at the glass, then at Maya's plastic cup, then directly at Sharon. "Thank you," he said slowly. Sharon's smile faltered for just a second before she recovered and walked away. Maya picked up her plastic cup and took a sip. The water was lukewarm. She looked out the window at the clouds below, trying to push down the familiar feeling of humiliation that threatened to rise up and choke her. She'd dealt with worse. She'd faced down senior surgeons who questioned her competence. She'd worked twice as hard as her colleagues to prove she deserved her place. This was just another day, another battle. But God, she was tired of fighting. The South Asian woman from the row ahead turned around slightly, catching Maya's eye. She mouthed 2 words, "I'm sorry." Maya nodded and managed a small smile. At least someone saw it. At least she wasn't imagining things. 2 hours into the flight, the cabin grew cooler as the sun set outside. Maya felt goosebumps rise on her arms. She pressed the call button again, dreading the interaction but needing a blanket. This time, a different flight attendant appeared, a young man with friendly eyes. "How can I help you? Could I get a blanket, please?" Maya asked. "Oh, I'm so sorry," he said, looking genuinely apologetic. "We've distributed all the blankets already. Let me check if we have any extras in the back." He disappeared into the galley. Maya heard low voices, Sharon's rising slightly above the others. The young man returned empty-handed. "I'm really sorry," he said quietly. "Apparently we're all out. That's okay." "Thank you for checking," Maya said. He hesitated, his eyes flicking toward the galley, then back to Maya. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then thought better of it and walked away. Not 5 minutes later, Richard shifted in his seat and caught Sharon's attention as she passed. "Excuse me, would you happen to have a blanket? It's gotten a bit chilly." "Of course." Sharon's voice was bright and eager. "Let me grab one for you." She returned within seconds, blanket in hand, and helped Richard unfold it with an attentiveness that made Maya's stomach turn. Richard caught Maya's eye across the aisle. His face reddened. "This is unacceptable," he muttered, but not loud enough for Sharon to hear. Maya said nothing. What was there to say? The evidence spoke for itself, playing out in real time for anyone paying attention. When the meal service began, Sharon rolled the cart through the cabin with practiced efficiency. Maya watched as she stopped at each row, describing the menu options in detail. "For our main course this evening, we have a choice of pan-seared salmon with roasted vegetables, braised short ribs with truffle mashed potatoes, or a vegetarian pasta primavera. We also have a fresh Caesar salad to start, and for dessert, we're offering either chocolate mousse or fresh berry tart." Each passenger got the full presentation, the full choice. Sharon reached Maya's row and set a tray down in front of her without preamble. On it sat the pasta, a small salad, and what looked like the chocolate mousse. "Wait," Maya said. "What were the other options?" "This is what we have available," Sharon said curtly. "But you just offered the gentleman behind me a choice of 3 meals." "We're limited on some items," Sharon said, her voice rising slightly. "If you're unhappy with the meal, I can see if economy has something else." The threat was clear. The implication hung in the air. "This is more than you deserve anyway." Maya's hands curled into fists beneath her tray table. "The salmon, please." "I'd like the salmon." "As I said, we're limited on—" "I heard you offer it to every single person in this cabin," Maya interrupted, her voice quiet but firm. "I would like the salmon." Sharon's jaw tightened. "I'll check with the galley." She walked away, and Maya heard her speaking in hushed, irritated tones with another crew member. When she returned, her face was flushed. "We've given the last salmon portion to another passenger," Sharon announced loudly enough for nearby rows to hear. "You'll need to choose something else." The woman from the row ahead turned around fully now. Her name tag from a conference lanyard around her neck read, "Dr. Priya Chandran." "That's strange," Priya said clearly. "I was just offered the salmon 30 seconds ago and declined it. There should still be portions available." Sharon's eyes widened. There must have been confusion in the galley." "Perhaps you should check again," Priya suggested, her tone polite but steely. Sharon disappeared, and this time when she returned, she practically slammed the salmon meal onto Maya's tray table. "Here, your salmon." "Thank you," Maya said evenly. She ate in silence, the food tasteless in her mouth. Around her, passengers chatted quietly, enjoyed their meals, asked for wine refills. Normal things. Easy things. Things that shouldn't require this much effort. Maya pulled out her phone again and added more notes. The blanket, the meal. The pattern was undeniable now. She wasn't being paranoid. She wasn't being difficult. This was really happening. Richard leaned across the aisle, his voice low. "Are you documenting this?" Maya looked at him, trying to read his intentions. "Good," he said before she could answer. "You should. This is discrimination, plain and simple. I've sat here watching it happen, and I'm ashamed I didn't speak up louder sooner." "It's not your job to fight my battles," Maya said quietly. "Maybe not," Richard admitted, "but silence makes me complicit."
"I've been complicit too many times in my life."
"I'm 63 years old, and I've watched things like this happen and told myself it wasn't my business." He paused. "I was wrong. It is my business. It's everyone's business. Priya turned around again. He's right. I'm a professor at Columbia, and I deal with versions of this constantly. People assuming I'm in the wrong place, asking me if I'm lost when I walk into my own lecture hall. We can't let this behavior go unchallenged. Maya felt something shift in her chest. For so long she'd fought these battles alone, telling herself that speaking up would only make her look difficult, would only confirm stereotypes. But maybe she didn't have to be alone this time. Thank you, she said to both of them, both of you, for seeing it, for saying something. We should be thanking you, Priya said, for handling this with such grace. I don't know if I could have stayed as calm. You learn to, Maya said softly. You learn to swallow it, to manage your reaction because any show of anger will be used against you. Any frustration will be labeled as aggressive or difficult. Richard shook his head. That's exhausting. It is, Maya agreed. It really, really is. Sharon passed by their section and her eyes narrowed as she took in the three of them talking. She knew they were discussing her. The defensiveness radiated from her posture. The flight stretched on. Maya tried to work on her laptop, but concentration was impossible. She kept replaying every interaction, questioning herself despite knowing better. Had she been too sensitive? Too quick to assume? But no, the evidence was clear. The pattern was undeniable. In the galley, Sharon stood with her arms crossed, watching Maya through the gap in the curtain. Whatever she was thinking, whatever justifications she was building in her mind, they were about to crumble, because in 20 minutes, the captain would make an announcement that would change everything. The seatbelt sign dinged off as the plane reached its cruising altitude over the Atlantic. Maya closed her laptop, too distracted to focus on her speech anymore. Her mind kept replaying every small humiliation, every dismissive look, every moment that made her feel like she didn't belong in this seat she'd paid for. She glanced at Sharon in the galley, laughing with another flight attendant, completely at ease. How many times had she done this to other passengers? How many people had sat in their seats swallowing their dignity, convincing themselves it was easier to stay quiet? Maya picked up her phone again and scrolled through her notes. The evidence was all there, time-stamped and detailed. Part of her wanted to delete it all, to let it go like she'd let go of so many other incidents. But another part of her, the part that was tired of being tired, held on tight. The cabin speakers crackled to life, and the captain's voice filled the space. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Andrews speaking from the flight deck. Maya barely registered the words at first. The usual flight information, altitude, weather conditions in London. We're making excellent time tonight, the captain continued, and we should arrive about 15 minutes ahead of schedule. I also want to take a moment to mention that we have a very special passenger on board with us today. Maya's stomach dropped. No. Please, no. Dr. Maya Johnson is traveling to London to receive the International Humanitarian Medical Award from the Royal College of Surgeons, the captain said, his voice warm with pride. For those who may not know, Dr. Johnson is one of the world's leading cardiovascular surgeons and the medical director at Metropolitan General Hospital in New York. Maya felt every eye in the cabin turned toward her. Heat flooded her face. Dr. Johnson recently pioneered a groundbreaking surgical technique that has already saved hundreds of lives, the captain went on. But what makes her truly exceptional is her dedication to serving those who need it most. For the past 5 years, she's been running a free cardiac clinic in underserved neighborhoods, providing life-saving care to patients who otherwise couldn't afford it. The plane was silent except for the hum of engines. Maya could feel Sharon's stare burning into her from the galley. She's also trained over 200 surgeons in developing countries, traveling on her own time and at her own expense to share her skills and knowledge. The work she's done has impacted thousands of families around the world. Maya's eyes stung. She stared hard out the window, willing herself not to cry. During this trip, Dr. Johnson will not only receive this prestigious award, but she'll also be meeting with members of Parliament to discuss expanding global access to cardiac care. We are truly honored to have her aboard tonight. The captain paused, and Maya could hear the smile in his voice. Dr. Johnson, on behalf of everyone at the airline and all of us on the crew, congratulations on this incredible achievement. And to all our passengers, please join me in congratulating Dr. Johnson on her well-deserved recognition. The cabin erupted in applause. Maya turned from the window, managing a small wave and a nod. Passengers smiled at her, some standing slightly to clap. Richard was beaming, applauding enthusiastically. Priya caught her eye and mouthed, "Wow." But Maya's gaze was drawn to the galley where Sharon stood frozen, her face the color of chalk. Her hand gripped the edge of the counter as if she needed it to stay upright. The other flight attendant next to her was whispering something urgent, but Sharon didn't seem to hear. She just stared at Maya, her mouth slightly open. The applause continued for what felt like an eternity. Maya smiled and nodded, playing the gracious recipient, but inside she felt a tangle of emotions she couldn't quite name. Vindication, yes, but also a deep, aching sadness that it had taken this announcement for her to be seen as worthy of basic respect. As the applause finally died down, passengers began approaching her. An elderly woman from a few rows back made her way forward. "Dr. Johnson, my grandson had heart surgery last year. He's alive because of doctors like you. Thank you for everything you do." "Thank you," Maya said softly. "That means so much." A businessman stopped by her seat. "My company does medical supply distribution. If there's anything your clinic needs, please let me know. I'd like to help." One by one they came, sharing stories, offering support, seeing her suddenly as a person deserving of their attention and respect. Maya appreciated their kindness, but the irony wasn't lost on her. She'd been the same person 30 seconds before the announcement. Nothing about her had changed except what they knew about her achievements. Through it all, Sharon remained in the galley, watching. Her face had shifted from shock to something that might have been shame, but Maya couldn't be sure. Richard leaned across the aisle once the flow of well-wishers slowed. "Well, that certainly changed the atmosphere." "Did it?" Maya asked quietly. "Or did it just change what people think about who deserves to sit in first class?" Richard absorbed that, nodding slowly. "You're right. You shouldn't have needed credentials and awards to be treated with basic human dignity." "No one should," Priya added from her seat. "But especially in cases like this, we know why it happened." Maya saw Sharon finally move. The flight attendant took a deep breath, smoothed her uniform, and began walking toward Maya's seat. Her steps were slow, hesitant. She looked like she was walking to her own execution. Maya's heart began to race. She didn't want this confrontation, this performance of remorse that would probably be more about Sharon's guilt than Maya's humanity. Sharon stopped beside Maya's seat, her hands clasped in front of her. "Dr. Johnson," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "I want to apologize for any misunderstanding earlier." Misunderstanding. The word hung in the air like smoke. "What misunderstanding?" Maya asked calmly. Sharon's eyes widened. I may have seemed unwelcoming. I was just doing my job, following our protocols about checking boarding passes and ensuring passenger comfort." "What protocol requires you to check my boarding pass 3 times when you checked everyone else's once?" Maya's voice was quiet but steady. "What protocol means I get water in a plastic cup while other passengers get crystal glasses? What protocol left me without a blanket while you found one immediately for the gentleman across from me?" Several nearby passengers had gone quiet, listening. Sharon's face flushed red. Those were just unfortunate coincidences. Supply issues. I would never intentionally..." "Wouldn't you?" Maya interrupted. "Because from where I sat, your intentions were very clear. You decided the moment you saw me that I didn't belong in this seat. You decided I couldn't afford it, that I must have made a mistake, that I needed to be questioned and watched and reminded of my place." Tears welled in Sharon's eyes. "I treat all passengers equally. I've been doing this job for 15 years and I've never..." "Never what?" Priya turned around, her voice sharp. "Never discriminated? I watched you treat her differently from the moment she sat down." "We all did." Other passengers murmured agreement. Sharon looked around, seemingly just now realizing how many witnesses there were to her behavior. "I'm sorry," Sharon whispered, the words barely audible. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean..." "You did mean it," Maya said, not unkindly but firmly. "Maybe you didn't think about it consciously. Maybe you told yourself you were just being thorough or following procedure, but you made assumptions about me based on how I look, and you treated me accordingly." A man in a crisp uniform appeared from the front of the plane. His name tag identified him as David, the senior purser. His expression was grave. "Sharon," he said quietly, "I need you to come with me, please." Sharon's eyes went wide with panic. "David, I was just apologizing. I was trying to make things right." "We'll discuss this in private," David said firmly. Then he turned to Maya and his entire demeanor softened. "Dr. Johnson, on behalf of our airline, I want to personally apologize for the treatment you received today. What happened was completely unacceptable, and I assure you it will be addressed. Thank you, Maya said. David guided Sharon away, and Maya heard her begin to protest, her voice rising with excuses and justifications. The galley curtain closed behind them, muffling the conversation. The cabin remained quiet. Maya felt drained, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. She'd won something today, she supposed. She'd been vindicated. But the victory felt hollow because she knew the truth. Without that announcement, without the captain revealing her accomplishments, would anyone have cared about how she was treated? Would Sharon have faced any consequences? Or would Maya have just been another passenger who left the plane carrying the weight of 1,000 small indignities, wondering if she'd imagined it all? She looked out at the dark ocean below, at the stars scattered across the night sky, and let herself finally, quietly, cry. Maya wiped her eyes quickly, hoping no one had noticed the tears. But Priya was already out of her seat, moving to the empty one beside Maya. "May I?" she asked gently. Maya nodded, grateful for the company. Priya settled in, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then Priya said softly, "You don't have to be strong right now." "What happened was awful. I'm used to it," Maya said, then laughed bitterly at her own words. "Isn't that terrible? I'm used to being treated like I don't belong." "It is terrible," Priya agreed. "I teach sociology at Columbia, and I spend my days studying discrimination and bias. But knowing the statistics and theories doesn't make it hurt less when it happens to you." She paused. "Last month, a student asked me when the real professor would arrive. I was standing at the front of the classroom 10 minutes into the lecture." Maya turned to look at her. "What did you do?" "I smiled and continued teaching," Priya said. "Because that's what we do, right? We smile and continue. We prove ourselves over and over, and still, some people will only see what they want to see." Richard appeared at the end of their row, holding his phone. "I hope I'm not interrupting, but I wanted you to know something. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and what I witnessed today needs to be told. Not just your story specifically, but the larger issue. Would you ever consider being interviewed about experiences like this?" Maya hesitated. "I don't know. I've always kept my head down, focused on my work. Speaking out feels like inviting more trouble." "I understand," Richard said, "but silence is what allows this to continue. People like me, we need to hear these stories. We need to be confronted with what we've been ignoring." He handed her his card. "No pressure. But if you ever want to talk, I'd be honored to help share your perspective." Maya took the card, tucking it into her pocket. "Thank you. I'll think about it." As Richard returned to his seat, a younger woman approached from economy class. She was probably 19 or 20, with dark skin and her hair in beautiful braids. She looked nervous. "Dr. Johnson?" she said quietly. "I'm sorry to bother you. I was using the restroom and heard people talking about what happened, and about who you are." "It's no bother," Maya said warmly, seeing something of her younger self in this girl's uncertain posture. "I'm Zara. I'm flying to London for an international science competition. I'm studying biomedical engineering." She shifted from foot to foot. "I just wanted to say that you're like my hero. I've read about your work in my classes. I have your research paper on minimally invasive valve repair saved on my phone." Maya felt her chest tighten with emotion. "Sit down, please. Tell me about your project." Zara's face lit up as she settled into Richard's temporarily empty seat. "I designed a low-cost heart monitoring device for rural clinics in East Africa. Most places there don't have access to the expensive equipment, so people with heart conditions often go undiagnosed until it's too late." "That's incredible," Maya said, genuinely impressed. "What inspired you?" "My grandmother died of heart disease when I was 12. She lived in Kenya, and by the time they figured out what was wrong, it was too late." Zara's voice grew passionate. "I just kept thinking, what if there had been a way to catch it earlier? What if cost wasn't a barrier to basic cardiac care?" Maya listened as Zara described her device, asking questions, offering suggestions. This was why she'd become a doctor, why she'd opened the free clinic, why she traveled to places with limited resources to train other surgeons. For young people like Zara, who saw problems in the world and had the audacity to believe they could solve them. "You remind me so much of myself at your age," Maya said. "Do you have a card or email? I'd love to stay in touch. Maybe help mentor you if you're interested." Zara's eyes went wide. "Are you serious? That would be amazing. I mean, yes, please, absolutely." They exchanged information, and Maya found herself smiling genuinely for the first time since boarding the plane. "You're going to do incredible things, Zara. I can already tell." "Thank you," Zara said. "And Dr. Johnson? What happened today with that flight attendant? It was wrong. But the way you handled it with so much dignity, that taught me something too. About standing up for yourself without losing yourself." After Zara returned to her seat, Maya sat back and closed her eyes. The flight was more than half over now. In a few hours they'd land in London, and this would all be over. But would it really be over? Or would she carry this with her? Another weight added to the collection she'd been gathering her whole life? David, the senior purser, appeared again. He carried a leather folder and had the cautious look of someone about to deliver difficult news. "Dr. Johnson, may I have a moment?" "Of course." He crouched beside her seat, speaking quietly. "First, please accept this as a token of our sincere apology." He opened the folder to reveal a handwritten note on airline letterhead. "This is from Captain Andrews personally. He wanted you to know how deeply sorry he is that you were treated this way on our aircraft." Maya scanned the note. The captain's handwriting was neat and precise, his words carefully chosen. He praised her work, apologized for Sharon's behavior, and promised a full investigation. "There's also this," David continued, producing a bottle of champagne. "I know it's a small gesture given what happened, but we wanted to do something." "Thank you," Maya said, meaning it. "What will happen to Sharon?" David's expression became serious. "She's been suspended, effective immediately. When we land, she'll be sent home on the next available flight. There will be a full investigation by our Human Resources Department." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "I need to be honest with you. This isn't Sharon's first complaint. There have been 2 other incidents in the past 18 months. Passengers reported feeling discriminated against, but the complaints were downplayed, attributed to misunderstandings or personality conflicts." Maya felt a chill. How many people did she treat this way before anyone took it seriously? "Too many," David admitted, and she could hear real regret in his voice. The previous complaints weren't as well documented. There were no witnesses willing to speak up. It was easier for the airline to dismiss them as he said, she said situations. He looked directly at Maya. "Your documentation, your notes, the witnesses who saw what happened, they made it impossible to ignore. You may have just prevented this from happening to countless other passengers." "I shouldn't have had to document it," Maya said quietly. "Those other passengers shouldn't have been dismissed." "You're absolutely right," David said, "and I promise you this is going to lead to changes. Mandatory bias training for all crew members. A clearer reporting system for discrimination complaints. Better follow-through on investigations." "Will those changes actually happen?" Maya asked. "Or will everyone forget about this once I'm off the plane?" David met her eyes steadily. "I can't promise perfection, but I can promise that I will personally make sure your experience is shared with our training department, our executive leadership, and our policymakers. What happened to you matters." A mother traveling with 2 young children stopped by. "Dr. Johnson, I just wanted to say thank you. I've been teaching my daughters about standing up for what's right, and today they got to see a real example of grace under pressure. You handled that situation with such dignity." Her daughters, maybe 7 and 9 years old, peeked around their mother shyly. The older one whispered, "You're really brave." Maya's throat tightened. "Thank you, sweetie. And you know what? You're brave too. Speaking up is always brave, even when it's scary." After they left, Priya squeezed Maya's hand. "You're making a difference, you know, not just in operating rooms, but right here, right now. Everyone on this plane witnessed what happened. They saw discrimination in action, and they saw someone refuse to accept it. That changes people." "Does it?" Maya wondered aloud. "Or do they go home, feel good about supporting me, and then stay silent the next time they see it happen to someone else?" "Some will," Priya acknowledged. "But some won't. Richard clearly won't. That mother teaching her daughters won't. Zara definitely won't." She smiled. "Change happens slowly, one person at a time. You planted seeds today. whether you meant to or not. Maya looked around the cabin. Passengers were reading, sleeping, watching movies. Normal activities on a normal flight. But something had shifted. She could feel it in the air, in the way people glanced at her with respect, in the quiet conversation she could hear about fairness and dignity. She pulled out her phone one more time and looked at her notes. All the documentation, all the evidence. She'd started recording everything as a defensive measure, to protect herself from being called difficult or oversensitive. But maybe it could be something more. Maybe her experience could actually lead to change. Outside the window, stars still dotted the dark sky. Below, the Atlantic stretched endlessly, and somewhere up ahead, London waited with its ceremony and recognition and future possibilities. Maya closed her notes and opened a new document. She began to write, not a speech for the award ceremony, but her own story, in her own words. Because Priya was right. Silence was safe, but it changed nothing. And Maya was tired of being safe. The plane began its descent into London just as dawn broke over the city. Maya hadn't slept. She'd spent the last few hours writing, the words pouring out of her in a way they hadn't when she'd tried to craft the perfect acceptance speech. This wasn't about sounding impressive or hitting the right diplomatic notes. This was raw and real and true. As the wheels touched down on the runway, passengers applauded, the way people sometimes do after long flights. Maya gathered her things slowly, watching other travelers stand and stretch, pull bags from overhead compartments, check their phones as signals returned. Sharon was nowhere to be seen. David had quietly moved her to a crew rest area for the remainder of the flight. When Maya stepped into the jet bridge, she was surprised to find airport staff waiting with a bouquet of flowers and a welcome sign. A woman in a smart uniform stepped forward. "Dr. Johnson, welcome to London. We're honored to have you. If you'll follow me, we'll escort you through customs and have you on your way quickly." The VIP treatment felt surreal after everything that had happened. Maya followed, aware of other passengers watching, some taking photos. This was the reception Sharon had probably expected someone in first class would receive. The irony wasn't lost on Maya. As they walked through the terminal, Richard caught up with her. "Maya, I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I meant what I said. If you ever want to talk about doing a documentary segment on discrimination in travel, or healthcare access, or anything really, please call me." "I will," Maya promised, and this time she meant it. Priya appeared next, pulling a small suitcase. "I'm giving a lecture at Oxford next week. If you're still in the country, I'd love for you to join me. We could do a joint talk on breaking barriers in our fields." They exchanged numbers, and Maya realized she'd gained something unexpected from this horrible experience. Allies, connections, people who'd witnessed the truth and refused to look away. Zara rushed over, slightly out of breath from running through the terminal. "I just wanted to say goodbye and thank you again. You've inspired me more than you know." "You've inspired me too," Maya said, pulling the young woman into a hug. "Go win that competition, and stay in touch." The customs process was quick, and soon Maya found herself in a car headed to her hotel. The driver made polite conversation about the weather and London landmarks, oblivious to the emotional storm she'd just weathered. At the hotel, Maya checked in and went straight to her room. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in her travel clothes, and opened her phone. 3 missed calls from her department chair. 2 texts from colleagues congratulating her on the award. 1 email from the airline's corporate office with a formal apology and a request to discuss the incident further. And then she saw it. A notification from a social media platform. Someone had recorded the captain's announcement on their phone. Another passenger had filmed the moment when everyone applauded. The videos were already circulating online. Maya's hands trembled as she read the comments. Thousands of them. "This is why representation matters. I've experienced the exact same thing. Thank you for not staying silent. That flight attendant should never work again. This doctor is a hero, but she shouldn't have needed credentials to be treated with basic respect." The story was spreading. News outlets were picking it up. Her phone began ringing with interview requests. Maya turned it off and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. This was bigger than her now. Her private humiliation had become a public conversation about something that happened every day to countless people who didn't have awards or accomplishments to validate their worth. 3 days later, Maya stood at the podium in the Grand Hall of the Royal College of Surgeons. The room was filled with hundreds of doctors, researchers, and healthcare leaders from around the world. The award ceremony had been lovely, the speeches praising her work sincere and moving. But now it was her turn to speak, and she'd abandoned her original carefully crafted speech. Instead, she pulled out the pages she'd written on the plane. "Thank you for this incredible honor," she began. "When I started my career 30 years ago, I was often the only black woman in the operating room. I was questioned, doubted, and underestimated. I learned to work twice as hard, to be twice as prepared, to prove myself again and again." The room was silent, attentive. I told myself that if I achieved enough, published enough research, saved enough lives, performed enough surgeries, eventually I would earn the respect that should have been given freely from the start. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. 3 days ago, on my flight to receive this award, I learned that no amount of achievement protects you from the assumptions people make based on how you look. Maya described what happened, not sparing details. She talked about the plastic cup, the blanket that didn't exist, the meal she almost wasn't allowed to choose. She spoke about the exhaustion of constantly proving your worth, the toll it takes on your spirit to be treated as suspicious in spaces you've earned the right to occupy. "The captain's announcement changed how I was treated," she said. "Suddenly I was worthy of respect. Suddenly I belonged. But I was the same person before that announcement as after. The only difference was that people knew about my accomplishments." She let that sink in before continuing. "We talk a lot about diversity in medicine, about breaking barriers and creating opportunities, but we don't talk enough about the daily indignities that make those barriers so exhausting to break. We don't talk about how tiring it is to carry excellence as armor, knowing that anything less will be used to confirm someone's worst assumptions about people who look like you." Maya's voice grew stronger. "I'm grateful for this award, truly. But I'm more grateful for the passengers who witnessed what happened and spoke up. For the young woman pursuing biomedical engineering who reminded me why this work matters. For everyone who refuses to look away when discrimination happens right in front of them." She looked directly at the audience. "The flight attendant who treated me poorly is facing consequences. The airline is implementing new training. But real change doesn't happen with one incident, one policy, one training session. It happens when each of us commits to seeing people's humanity before their credentials, when we question our assumptions, when we speak up even when it's uncomfortable." The applause started slowly, then built into a standing ovation. Maya saw tears in several eyes, nodding heads, people who understood exactly what she was talking about. After the ceremony, she was swarmed with people wanting to share their own stories. A Pakistani surgeon who was regularly mistaken for a nurse, a Latino researcher whose credentials were constantly questioned, an indigenous doctor who faced assumptions about affirmative action rather than merit. "Thank you for saying what we've all felt," one woman told her. "Thank you for not staying quiet." That evening, Maya sat in her hotel room and finally turned her phone back on. The messages were overwhelming, but one caught her eye. It was from an unknown number. "Dr. Johnson, this is Sharon Mitchell. I don't expect you to read this or respond. I just need you to know that I've spent the last 3 days in mandatory training and deep reflection. You were right about everything. I made assumptions based on prejudices I didn't even know I had. I convinced myself I was just being thorough, but I was really being discriminatory. I'm sorry isn't enough, but it's all I have. I'm working to be better. I hope someday I can prove that people can change." Maya read it twice, then set the phone down. She didn't owe Sharon forgiveness. She didn't owe her a response. But she appreciated the honesty more than she expected to. 6 months later, Maya delivered a TEDx talk about implicit bias in everyday interactions. The video went viral, viewed millions of times. Airlines around the world began implementing new anti-discrimination training, using her story as a case study. Zara won her science competition and secured funding for her heart monitoring device. She sent Maya updates regularly, and they'd met twice more to discuss her research. Richard's documentary about discrimination in travel featured Maya's story alongside dozens of others. It sparked conversations across the industry about who gets believed, who gets questioned, and who gets basic dignity. And Maya continued her work. Operating rooms, free clinics, training programs in countries that needed skilled surgeons. She spoke up more now, less worried about being seen as difficult, more concerned with being seen as silent. 1 year after that flight, Maya boarded another plane. Different airline, different route. She settled into her first-class seat, and the flight attendant approached with a warm smile. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Johnson. We're honored to have you with us today. Can I get you anything before we take off?" Maya smiled back. "Just some water, please. In whatever cup is easiest." The flight attendant returned with a crystal glass, ice water with lemon. "Here you are. And if you need anything during the flight, anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask." As the plane took off, Maya looked out the window at the clouds below. She thought about that night over the Atlantic, how violated and diminished she'd felt, how she'd almost stayed quiet, almost let it go like she'd let so many other incidents go. But she'd spoken up, and it had mattered, not because it had changed everything overnight, not because discrimination had disappeared, but because her voice had joined a chorus of other voices, all insisting on the same simple truth. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their credentials, accomplishments, or status. Everyone deserves to be seen as human first. Maya pulled out her laptop and began writing again. There were more stories to tell, more truths to speak, and she was done staying quiet.